Thank you, Pat, for the introduction. And let me just tell you what an honor and a privilege it is to be the director of the Institute of Politics here at ASU. Harvard University established its Institute of Politics in the 1960s, mostly by the Kennedy family. And so that's been there for a long time. More recently, University of Chicago, David Axelrod, the founding director there. Cheryl and I have been able to be at both institutions. And so it's wonderful that ASU now will have its own Institute of Politics, where we'll have speakers like Mark Cuban come in. We'll have fellows who will be here on campus to meet with students, have office hours, to do seminars, and we'll fund scholarships and do workshops for people who want to get into public service, whether it's elected office or otherwise. But speaking of...
And I just got to say, I founded at Indiana University a bar. So I'm trying to catch up to you.
We'll talk about some of that. It's coming. But Mark and I, we've known each other for more than a decade now. We've had the privilege, our family liked the best, of actually going to Shark Tank and watching an episode being filmed. That was quite something. And but anyway, 5 years ago, when I went to the to Harvard, to its Institute of Politics as a fellow, they asked us to bring speakers in, and Mark was kind enough to come there 5 years ago and speak to the students, and obviously they loved it. I think the Mavs were playing the Celtics the night before, so it worked out. But
no basketball question.
I just don't have one of those.
I'll talk about foreign trade. I'll talk about international trade. I won't talk NBA trades.
But last night, let's get real.
No, there was no last night.
No, I thought it was really neat, though, to be there and to hug Luca's father, there, and his agent, and
all I said to him, I gave him a big hug, and I said, it wasn't my fault.
Well, anyway, we'll put that aside from now.
Please.
We have ASU students here, so let's talk a little about college. But before we do that, talk a little about your own childhood. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Yep.
Who, when you were growing up, who did you look up to? Who was a source of inspiration? Were they athletes, politicians?
My dad. 100% my dad. My dad did upholstery on cars. So if you had a rip in your car seat in your car, you took it to my dad. And he did that his whole life, basically. And he just would leave the house at 7 in the morning, come back at 6, 7 at night, and half a day on Saturdays. And, just watching him give up everything for us and do everything he could for us, that was all the motivation. And I remember he would take me to work, not because he wanted me to learn about upholstery, but he wanted me to sweep the floor because he wanted me to learn that this is not the job he wanted for me. That he wanted me to go to college. He never did. His brother ended up going, but my mom never went to college. My dad didn't go to college, so that was like they wanted to show me the path.
Were you an entrepreneur from the start?
Oh, I was a hustler. I mean, yes.
Talk about the first few jobs.
Yeah, so like selling baseball cards. Like there's a little park down where we lived, and it had a park bench, and growing up in Pittsburgh with baseball cards, if I would put together these packs of cards with guaranteed one Pittsburgh Pirate in the pack, and then I would sell them. It cost me like 50 cents to make them. I'd sell them for $1, and then I'd keep on going and going and going, and that made me some candy money for a while. And then when I was 12, my dad and his buddies were playing poker at our house, drinking their asses off and talking shit, and I went in there and I said, Dad, I want a new pair of basketball shoes. He looks at me, he goes, you see those shoes in your feet? When you get a job, you can buy any pair of shoes you want. I'm like, Dad, I'm 12 years old. And one of his drunk buddies were like, I got a job for you. I'm like, sure. He goes, I've got these boxes of garbage bags, and you can go door to door to door in the neighborhood and sell the garbage bags. You buy them for $3 and you'll sell them for $6. I'm like, cool. And it was the best thing. I learned more about business from doing that than anything in my entire life. It was like, hi, my name is Mark. Do you use garbage bags? And it was like the world's first, probably only and last garbage bag route, but I killed it. I used to have my little red wagon, and I drag them around and make my little brother help. And then when I hit 16, I had different things, but I mean, I sold magazines door to door. I bought and sold stamps. Like stamps then and probably now, coins, like it was an inefficient market. So I would go with a few dollars to a stamp show. I'd start on one side and I'd buy a stamp and I'd like, wait, this guy doesn't know that this is a valuable stamp, or at least marginally valuable stamp. And I'd come with $5 and leave with $50. I mean, it was great. And so just learning about markets and all that stuff, all by the time I was 18.
Yeah. Well, by the time you were 18, you were already in college, I take it.
Yeah, actually by the time I was 16. So I went to Mount Lebanon High School, and when I was a junior, they wouldn't let me take the senior level econ class. And so I was like, I want to be in business. I want to do business. And they were like, no. And so I went to the University of Pittsburgh, night classes, and they didn't even have business classes. But I also took Russian, because my grandparents were from the old country. And so I went to Pitt, University of Pittsburgh local school, and I took a Russian class and I took a psychology class, and I did fairly well. And I'm like, okay, they won't let me take business. I'll just drop out of high school and go to college. And that's what I did. So I went to Pitt for a year, but they didn't really have a true business school. So I transferred to Indiana University, go Hoosiers, because of the list of the top 10 business schools, it was the cheapest one.
I was going to ask, what motivated that decision? Right?
Yeah, and I mean, it was great. Like, this is back in the day where registration isn't like it is today. Like, literally, you would see a class you wanted to register for, and you would stand in line. And they would go and they'd write your name and everything. So I vividly remember, I'm waiting in the lines too long, and there's a class right there, and because it was like, here's all the MBA classes, and here's all the undergrad classes. And there was a class right there with a really short line, and it was for MBA statistics, K501. And I stood in line there thinking, okay, if they register me, I'll take the class. And so I snuck in, and they registered me. I'm like, oh shit. So I took the class, and I did well, but the best part of the story of that happening, you talk about just the luck of randomness, the guy who taught me that class was a guy named Wayne Winston. And fast forward 20 and a little bit years later, I bought the Mavericks. And I just happened to be watching Jeopardy, and on comes Wayne Winston, and he's killing it, right? So I'm watching Wayne Winston kill it, right? And I'm like, good for you, Wayne. And not a month later, I go to Indiana to watch the Mavs play the Pacers. And I hear, Mark, Mark, Mark. And it's Wayne Winston, my prof from when I was 18 years old taking MBA statistics. And he's like, let's talk, da-da-da. The way he taught that class for statistics, he used all sports analogies. So how did you learn all the different stat stuff? Just sports analogy. And he came to me and he goes, look, we've got these ways to analyze lineups in the NBA that nobody's doing. I'm like, you're hired. And he was literally, because I snuck into this MBA class when I was 18 years old in Indiana University and happened to see him on Jeopardy. And then he came to the game and we got together. He became the first full-time analytics guy in the NBA, and we won so many games because of his lineups. And you just never know how things are going to turn out.
That's awesome. We'll talk a little more about politics in a minute, but when you were in college, did you think about politics? This was Jimmy Carter.
Yeah, I dated myself. Yeah, I actually voted my first time. I voted for a guy named John Anderson because I was always anti-incumbent no matter what. But yeah, my only politics were, okay, should I go to this bar or this bar? And if I stay out too late, will I be able to get up for class? I mean, no, I've been anti-politics forever. I literally would vote for either somebody who was not an incumbent or the candidate that would do the least. Because I don't want politicians to do anything. As an entrepreneur, it was scary to me what politicians might do. I didn't care about tax rates. I just leave it alone, so whatever I start doing, I can keep on doing. And it wasn't until 2016 and Donald Trump running, that's when I kind of changed.
One news outlet, I think, said that one of your jobs in college involved disco or lessons, or what was that?
So I had the world's best job. So my mom, thank God, when I was like 12, used to say, you're going to have to learn how to dance someday if you want to meet girls. And I was like, okay. And so she would teach me the box step and all this stuff. But my dad had rhythm, and I had some rhythm. And back then, this was like disco era, and you'd go dancing. You'd go out and go dancing. And somebody saw me at a club having fun, and they're like, hey, we've got all these people that are going to sorority house for Parents Weekend. Would you come and teach some dance moves and some line dances? We'll pay you $25 an hour. I'm like, let's go. You know? And so I went to sorority houses one at a time and, you know, would teach them. And then he got to teach individual lessons. Best job ever. Teaching sorority girls and their parents how to dance. Oh my God. If a genie popped up right there and there was the lamp, I'd be like, take me back, take me back.
We'll go out of order a little. Talk about Shark Tank for a bit. You once told me that, you know, you've been a public figure for a long time, long before Shark Tank.
Yeah.
Part of the reason you got on
Shark Tank, yeah.
But you said that the man on the street didn't recognize you until you did Shark Tank.
Yeah, it changed a lot of things.
Talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, people in sports knew me because of the Mavs, and I did Dancing with the Stars. Thank you. Google Mark Cuban Dancing with the Stars. That was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. Literally, you go out there and it was a live dance doing like stuff I wasn't comfortable with, you know, the jive and the rumba and all this other ballroom stuff. 22 million people watched us dancing live. And I just got to say, Floyd Mayweather was on my season with Dancing with the Stars. I kicked his ass. But then Marie Osmond took me down. But if you want a fun laugh, but in any event, so some people knew me from that, but Shark Tank just took it to a whole nother level. I mean, it just became like one of the top 2 shows watched on television, watched by families together on television, and just, you know, and doing the show a long time, it became an institution. And, you know, the best part about it was, as time went on, people would come up to me all the time and say, you know, my son and my daughter, we all watched the show together, and, you know, they're 12 years old and they started this business or that business. I had somebody chase me down on the streets in Manhattan to tell me about the slime business that their 12-year-old daughter had started. You remember the slime goop that was a big deal at the time, right? And they had made all this money because they watched Shark Tank. And now, like this last season, people were, by the way, Shark Tank Friday nights on ABC, just saying. And now, you know, people who grew up watching it are coming on the show. So, I mean, I was really proud to be part of it because, you know, I truly believe the American dream is alive and well. And as much as we can talk about politicians and the role they have, when it comes to making America what it is, entrepreneurship, you know, you don't talk about the Canadian dream or the Mexican dream. You talk about the American dream. And even people from outside the country know about the American dream. I mean, that's what makes us different. You know, everybody in this audience, I'm sure, at some time will or already has that feeling in their stomach, you know, where you have this idea and you're like, I got this idea. And you go, Jeff, what do you think? And Jeff goes, oh, that's a good idea. And then you go on Google and you're like, oh, nobody else is doing it, not thinking 50 companies have gone out of business doing it. But that's what makes us different. There is no other country in this world where people think to themselves, can I come up with an idea for a business? That's what makes us special. And Shark Tank, I think, it had a big say in that. That, you know, it shows so much in replays now that you can't turn on, you know, television or go on Hulu or go on YouTube and not see replays. So, you know, being part of that was really exciting to me.
You have a lot of fans in Turkey because of Shark Tank.
Oh, is it on Turkey?
Yeah, it comes on. So take us behind the scenes at Shark Tank. What does the viewer not see?
What does the viewer not see? Just how much of an idiot Kevin is. He's a nice guy, don't get me wrong. I like Kevin a lot. But he would say the same thing about me, and that's fine. But The deals walk in the door, we know nothing about them. They say, Mark and Jeff are coming in, and that's all we know. And they sit up there and they start pitching on the carpet. And on television, it can be 10, 14 minutes, depending on how they edit it. In real life, they can go an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours. And if it's really a good deal and we're intense about it, like the animosity you see between the sharks to get a good deal is real. And I've had some great deals come out of there. And now they've really just come to fruition, some of them. Anybody here use Dude Wipes? Well, if you don't use Dude Wipes, get your ass to the store. Literally get it. Get your ass to the store. But they're going to do $200 million this year. And I gave them, I think, $200,000 for 15 or 20% of the company, and they haven't raised money since. They're just killing it. Mush, which is oatmeal, Beatbox beverages. Anybody here ever drink Beatbox beverages? Yeah, and you have the hangover still to talk about it? I gave them $1 million for a third of the company, and now they're probably worth 800 or $1 billion. I mean, it's just insane, some of the companies. And then there's little ones that have done well as well. But yeah, it's been a great run. But some of these companies, you go on and they go back and forth, and then they edit it down. But the animosity you see between the sharks is real. And Kevin always wanting to do a royalty deal is real. Lori always wanting the crap like Damon talks about. It's really, it's a show I'm proud to be part of again, but it's just so much, right? I mean, like so many people, we've changed their lives. I think that's probably the most important part. You know, if there's 15 years and 200 deals that we see across, so that's 3,000 people, let's just say, you know, 40% of them close, that's 800 companies. And out of those 800 companies, if half of them do okay or better, we've probably created 40,000 millionaires. I mean, think about that. Just because of this show, and that doesn't count all the people who watched and were inspired to go out and start a company or learn how to improve their company. That's amazing. But again, that's what made it so special.
How much better are you now than you were when you started Shark Tank at spotting what?
No, I'm a sucker either way. Like, I do more deals than all the other sharks combined, because to me, there's deals where I'm like, that's a real way to make money. Then there's deals just like, okay, maybe I'm not going to make any money, but it sends a good message. And I'm okay with doing both kinds. And then there's deals where, this is probably behind the scenes that I shouldn't say. Like, there are times when Lori and Kevin just drone on, and Robert just drone on forever. They're like, this deal that should have taken 20 minutes to get them and get their butts out of here, we're in there for 90 minutes. I'm like, screw it. I'll make you an offer. I'm bored. Let's just get the hell out of here. And that probably happens too often.
Obviously, you've had a lot of success with your investments. You've also probably had a few.
Oh, I've had a lot of stinkers.
Can you talk about a few of those and what you learned?
So I'm not going to name drop this guy, but
and not just on Shark Tank, but outside.
No, we'll stick with Shark Tank. But there was this guy, and it was a breathometer where you could like blow into it, and it tells you your alcohol level. Well, I'm like, this is a great idea. You know, this could really go over really well, especially here at ASU. And I know how you guys are. But, you know, so we do a deal with somebody. I follow him on Instagram. And I follow not just the business, but the CEO. And all of a sudden, this guy is on this island. And he's in Vegas. You know, and you know the typical Vegas pictures, holding up the bottle, going, and I'm like, you're supposed to be grinding it out. You told us you were going to work 24/7. And every single picture is him just torched out of his mind. And it was probably 8 months later. It's like, Mark, I don't know what happened. We don't have enough cash. It's like, so I've had a few of those.
I thought you were going to say he went and tried to sell at my alma mater, BYU.
BYU, no, that didn't go over very well.
No.
Yeah, so there was a bunch of those where, you know, you just misjudge the entrepreneur, or other ones where it's like, because here's the other thing behind the scenes. Like, you do a deal, you shake on it, but we get to do due diligence to find out if there's something that they didn't disclose or we didn't ask them. And I can't tell you how many times, you ask them on the show, how much debt do you have? And they'll say, I got no debt. And then you do the due diligence, and they got $250,000 in credit card debt. And we're like, that's credit card debt. That doesn't count, right? That's not debt. So yeah, there's been a lot of mistakes made and a lot of lessons learned.
Let me go to one of the student questions here. If you had to propose one specific policy change that would make the biggest difference for startups, what would it be?
Oh, that's a great question. For startups. Really, that there would be no policy changes,
So consistency.
Consistency, yeah, because as long as, my attitude has always been, as long as everybody played by the same rules, then may the best entrepreneur win, or may the best product or service win. It's always when things change midstream, when you've already planned to do things a certain way, that's when you run into trouble.
Great. I'll go for another one. Given the current disruption of the status quo in the federal government and general economic uncertainty, there's that uncertainty we talked about, what's your advice for staying focused and optimistic over the next couple of years?
We all, no matter which side of the aisle you're on, we question the other party or the other group and who they like. I look at it kind of like your family and somebody, now, I'm not even going that direction. I'll get in trouble for that. It's only been 30 days. And there's a lot of things that are scary in my mind because we're testing a lot of limits. We're testing the rule of law. We're testing retribution. But this is a country that we always have a recency bias. If you go back and look through history and you're the historian, there's been some messed up times, where we were interning the Japanese. We're doing all these things that are outside the bounds of the rule of law. In hindsight, we had a civil war. And so I think that our guardrails are strong enough when it's all said and done. I also think that kind of the chaos that's going on is a gift to the Democratic Party, and they're blowing it. If I'm competing with, let's just use business as an analogy. If I have a company and one of my competitors is bought by somebody, and they have more money, more visibility, they may even be the incumbent, but they're taking over and installing their own people. I'm worried that they're going to install great people. But if they install not so great people, just people who are loyal to them, well, they can't execute on all these things that I'm concerned that they might do. And I think those are the circumstances we find ourselves in right now. I think Donald Trump is, one of the best salespeople in the history of salespeople. I think he's a great marketer, but, as someone who grew up as a salesperson and a marketer, the hard part isn't that part, it's the execution on all these things. And I'd be more concerned about some of the chaos if when you looked at the appointees, you said, that person is the right person for this job because they can execute on everything. I just don't see that. Some of these appointees who haven't managed 50 people or 100 people, let alone thousands or 10,000s or millions, they've got to be terrified right now. As much as we're worried they'll make a misstep, I'm guessing they have at least a little bit of self-awareness. They've got to be terrified. And so I think the Democrats are blowing just a historic opportunity, and I'll give you an example. So right now, when I was campaigning for Kamala Harris, one of the things I'd make a point of, because I was the guy who went out and talked to businesses, and I'd say, look, talking to Vice President Harris, we want to see the deficit decreased, 100%. There's too much debt, it's not sustainable, etc. And here, Trump and company and Elon cutting people left and right. Now, how many you can argue about, how you can definitely argue about. But when you cut a million people, let's say that's what it ends up, people who take the buyout, the probationary people, etc., there's going to be people there who are pregnant, women who are pregnant. There's going to be people there who are seriously ill. There's going to be people here that have chronic illnesses, mental health problems, whatever it is, out of all their people in those families and who had been getting benefits from the government. If I'm the Democrats, and I've said this to many Democrats, right? I'm like, why are you not proposing legislation that says protect pregnant women and ill federal government employees and have them guarantee severance instead of severance program? And just as importantly, say, if you are terminated or for whatever reason, or you take the buyout, then if you fell in these categories of illness, pregnancy, whatever it may be, you get to retain your health care benefits. Instead, they want to yell and scream, which is fine. Go to the rallies, have the rallies, go to the town halls, have the town halls. Yes, sue all the blocking and tackling. But they're not standing up for all these government employees that need someone to stand up for them right now. Why is nobody saying, we see that this is a problem? Why is nobody, look, they don't have the House, they don't have the Senate, but can they get 3 people in the Senate or 4 people in the Senate to agree that we need to protect the ill and those with chronic illnesses and pregnant women that are terminated? That's not a big stretch. And so there's a long, So call your congressperson, call your senator. There's so many of those types of things, and you can even mess with them and have fun with it. So, for instance, you could propose legislation that says we are all against corruption. If DOJ finds any corruption, criminal charges have to be filed within 90 days. And if they're not, whoever publicly says there's criminal conduct is liable for libel and slander. Now think about that. There's one guy who likes to talk about all the money they're saving and all their corruption and point out that this is corruption, that's corruption, this is corruption. Well, you make him put up or shut up. Because if there is corruption, we want him to find it. And if there's corruption, don't you want them to file charges against the people that are corrupt? Yes. It's just common sense. But where are they standing up for them? I'll give you a note. ASU, right? I'm sure ASU has got NIH money, right? And other grants for other reasons. And right now they have no idea how much money that they're going to get, right? It's complete uncertainty. But if someone from both parties, if it was bipartisan, said, you know what, there's this 51% administrative fee, they want to cut it to 15%, let's negotiate it to 40%. And if you were supposed to get $8 million like the University of Alabama in Birmingham, let's negotiate it to $6 million. So that the Democrats then take control of the process. Nobody wants to get less money, but what's even worse is getting no money. We're having to be so much chaos. So somebody negotiate all this, because then all of a sudden you can say, in this legislation, we've done all the work that you've refused to do. Because here's what they're missing and why this needs to be done. Somebody needs to do the actual negotiation. Because they haven't considered all the downstream issues. Laying off 1 million people or firing 1 million people or early buyouts, that's one thing. There's been industries that have lost 1 million people over a year or two, whatever, or multiple industries. We've seen that. The economy probably can absorb that. But what I'm hearing from people, whether it's at universities, at businesses that are contractors for the federal government, because the contractors don't know if they're getting their money, they're having to lay off their entire companies. Now, when that happens, it's not just the 1 million people that got fired. It's who knows, if you happen to be the dominant contractor or a big, your industry is big in a particular city or town, and now you're getting undermined and you basically have to lay people off because you don't know if you're going to get the grants that you thought you were guaranteed for the next 2 years. You literally could have towns and maybe cities decimated, which truly does impact the economy. So the Democrats need to be stepping up, because if not them, who? Aren't they supposed to be the party of the people, standing up for the people? Well, get off your asses, Democrats, and do something. Because I'm not looking for applause lines, but I truly believe, you can get 5 Republicans in the Senate and in the House to stand up for pregnant women and sick people. You can get those same Republicans in the Senate and the House to say, look, in my town or, my constituency, I'm going to have problems here. This is a red state. It's kind of purple, but it's mostly red in a big respect. There's going to be people here that lose their jobs if they have no understanding if these grants don't get paid. Somebody's got to stand up for them. So there's a lot of things that can be doing that kind of not undermine, but bring some order and calm to chaos. And that's, in my mind, what the Democrats should be doing. Standing up with legislation that makes sense. Again, if you want to go, and Bernie Sanders called Trump a Nazi and this and that, go do your thing, right? This is America. Protest, yes. I'm all for protest. No problem. You want to sue them to make sure they stay within the lines and follow everything? Yes. You're concerned about this, sue away, ACLU, et cetera, yes. But rather than just yelling, do something. Because when people see you standing up for them, then they start reconsidering. Because you can't just yell at people who voted for either party and say, you're dumb. That didn't work before, and it's not going to work now. So rather than being negative in everything you do what you got to do to protest, stand up where you got to stand up, that's a requirement, but stand up and do something for the people of this country that need something done for them.
Talk about a big issue that everyone's dealing with, AI and automation, rapidly evolving. What advice would you have for students on how to deal with that, and university leaders as well?
Has anybody here not used ChatGPT or something similar? You've not used it? Anybody? Bueller? No. You're not old enough to know that. You haven't? Yeah.
You haven't heard of Bueller, or you haven't used it? Okay. Gotcha.
However smart you are, if you're smart, whatever your strengths are, whatever it is, AI can make you better at it. That's it. Period, end of story. And if you go back through history, there's always, I remember, look, I'm old enough, I started selling PCs back when, in order to be able to sell a spreadsheet, I had to pay money to go get certified in order to sell Lotus 123. It's just insane in concept. And walking in, selling people their first PCs and their first software is the same feeling as it is now with ChatGPT, Gemini, Grok, etc. Because people were terrified. They're like, if I can do all this typing, why do I need a secretary? I took typing in high school. You know why people took typing in high school? Because people thought if you didn't type 55 words a minute, right, you weren't going to be able to get a job as a secretary. That sounds insane today, but AI is the exact same thing. All these things that we just assume are going to stay the same won't stay the same. And every tool is a tool that gives you a competitive advantage, whether it's trying to do better at your studies, whether it's trying to do better in your job. There's going to be two types of companies in this world. Those who are great at AI and everybody else that they put out of business. You have no choice. You have to know it. And again, I had these exact same conversations back in the day. You have to learn how to use a PC. Sounds insane now, doesn't it? You have to know what a spreadsheet is. I mean, what a word processor is. People were terrified of word processors, of databases. That's the same now. Now you read these studies that, if you use large language models of ChatGPT too much, you start losing your critical skills. No, I disagree with those. Because it doesn't matter what it is that you love. If you're curious, it's just a better rabbit hole. Yes, so they're going to hallucinate and give you misinformation sometimes. But last time I checked, doing a search, Google has a whole lot of misinformation. Or going on Reddit, God help you, right? Or TikTok, right? There's a ton. So don't be afraid of hallucinations. Always check and verify, trust and verify. But go down those rabbit holes and learn. Oh my God. And the videos that you're able to do now, maybe you're lucky and you're great at videos and you can be on the monitors at HUD in Washington, D.C. Not everybody got that. But to create whatever it is that you are, this just amplifies it. And if you're using it and you're using research tools, you're going to end up, for teachers here, teachers are going to have to do a lot more, questions in person to find out if somebody really knows something, and to find out what their analytical skills are. Just asking for a paper like would have happened in the past, last year or 2 years ago, maybe isn't going to cut it anymore. But the other thing I'll tell you, and I say this to any schools I've talked to, one of the big challenges, well, two big challenges for large language models, integrating some politics. The reason you saw Zuckerberg and all these guys kissing the ring in DC, they all have large language models that they see as trillion-dollar businesses, multi-trillion-dollar businesses. And one swipe of the pen, and by the president, and their businesses could be wiped out. So it made sense for them to be there. But the other element that's really critical and interesting for ASU is content. You read a lot more now saying that large language models, they've run out of things to index and train on. And so they're actually creating synthetic information, which I don't think is viable for everything. But ASU does research in politics, you do research in all these things. Every single day, somebody here comes up with something new that somebody had not thought of before. The question is, what do you do with it? In the past, you would have published it because publish or perish, right? Not anymore. Publishing, forget the perish, right? You know what? If you publish, you will perish. Think about how different that is and what that means. Because if you publish it, the reason you'll perish is it's going to be public, and the large language models are all going to index it and train on it. So effectively, you've shared it with the world in a way that these models are reasoning to try to help everybody else use. If it's me and I'm publishing, and I'm actually creating stuff, I'm keeping it to myself and licensing it, or having ASU put together a program, or having the Institute of Politics. Like all the research you guys do, you should be selling it to one of them to create more revenue, or keeping it to yourself. Because you don't want, you just worked 5 years on this research program and you come up with something really amazing, and even if you patent it, all of a sudden now you do a question about it in ChatGPT and they give you, a better summary than you wrote in your PhD. And so you've got to be careful what you publish, because you want to retain control of all your intellectual property. And so anything unique that you do, don't just make it available to everybody. And if not everybody's making it available, if everybody's not making it available, then how you use large language models change. Because there's going to be millions of large language models. There will be the ASU Institute of Politics large language model, because all the amazing stuff that Jeff contributes and everybody else contributes, you want that exclusive to you, so people come here and don't go to Indiana University Institute or Harvard Institute of Politics large language models. You want to retain that branding, and that's going to impact healthcare as well. The IU School of Health, the Stanford School of Health, you pick it, the Mayo Clinic, et cetera, they don't want all the research and the breakthroughs that their doctors and researchers have come up with just given away for free. They want to accrue that brand recognition for their models. It's a different world with AI, but it's a beautiful world, because no matter what it is that you're curious about, you can start interacting with these large language models, and if you get comfortable enough with them, creating your own. Because just like the PC I first sold was 6 megahertz speed. That's slower than the oldest BlackBerry that was ever created. And it had 10 megabits, not gigabits, megabits of storage. And I think 256K of RAM, and cost $5,000. That same price performance curve is happening with AI. It's going to be insane. Just insane. You'll have conversations like this, and I'll train one and say, no, Jeff, I can't make it. Just put up my avatar. You think I'm kidding? It's happening.
Could be right now. We don't know.
See, I just put my hand right through my face.
If you were at ASU right now and you had all of your knowledge but none of your money, what industry, what sector of the economy would you go into?
Well, first I transferred to Indiana University. I'd go into AI, right? So if I needed to make money right now, so if my dad was playing poker with his buddies, and instead of asking about tennis shoes, what would I do? Does anybody here use Notebook LM from Google? So Notebook LM has got this feature for podcasts. It is insane. You can take any PDF, and you feed it to it. And depending on how long, how many pages, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 10, 15 minutes later, it turns it into a podcast. Literally, it's like us having this conversation. And so if someone took the transcript of this and you wrote into it, do a summary of Jeff and Mark's conversation and talk to us about it and what you think. Literally asking this large language model to do a podcast of what it thinks. It starts, so Jeff and Mark had this really interesting podcast about a variety of topics. It'll freak you out. So in terms of what business I would start, I would go to smaller business, because Gen Z, you guys, like when we were growing up, you read everything. The people who read the most had the biggest advantage. You guys don't like to read. You want to YouTube University it, you want to, listen on a podcast, you want to do whatever, right? That's how you consume information. And so stuff that by default in a lot of businesses, training manuals, service manuals, onboarding stuff, health benefits, and manuals. Anything that's in writing where you get it when you go to your job or your school, go to class, whatever, your syllabus, and you just roll your eyes, and it's all TLDR, too long, didn't read. I mean, your whole lives are TLDR basically now. Well, you take it, anything that's TLDR, and you put it in, I guarantee it, you'll like, oh shit. Has anybody done the podcast feature? Is it not an oh shit thing? It truly is. It's amazing, right? And so when you truly, just try it. Notebook, the teachers here, put your syllabus in there, put some of your notes in there, and just put it in there and say, okay, for those of you who aren't actually going to read, here it is. It's insane. But the bigger point on AI, it's here, and it's not going anywhere. There's no way to stop it. And in terms of jobs going forward, there'll be more jobs, but there'll be different jobs. And there'll be creative destruction that some people won't like. Just like, going to Indiana, there were a lot of people from Terre Haute, and back then there were records. There are not many records anymore. Then there were CDs and DVDs. That just happens. It's part of it. There's unfortunate people who lose their livelihood, and that's wrong, and it's just inevitable. But it's going to create more opportunity, not less.
Talk about cost plus drug.
Glad you asked. Oh, look at that. So people know. Thank you. So about 4 or 5 years ago, I got a cold email from a Dr. Alex Oshmayansky. And he said that he wanted to start a compounding pharmacy in Denver, Colorado. And he wanted to make generic medications, injectable generic medications that were on short supply. Believe it or not, to this day, there are generic injectable medications that are in short supply, including drugs that are, for kids, pediatric cancer drugs, and, Pitocin, and all these other things. And I'm like, well, that's great, but that's not exciting because it's very limited, even though it's very needed. And so it was right around the time the pharma bro, Martin Shkreli, was going to jail. And I asked him, how is this dude, able to take this drug, Daraprim, and jack up the price 750% or whatever it was? And I started, looking at it, and it became really obvious that the reason was that there was no pricing transparency at all with medications. If you think about the process when you get something prescribed to you, it's, oh, Jeff, Mark, you need yada, yada, yada. What pharmacy do you use? That's it. Nobody asks, about the economics. Can you afford it? Nobody knows the price. And there are plenty of people with high deductible plans, high co-insurance, no insurance. We've heard the stories, maybe seen the stories where someone's in line in front of us and they realize what the price is going to be and they can't buy their medication. And it's heartbreaking. And so I said, well, look, if there's no transparency, let's create a company. We'll call it costplusdrugs.com. That's fully transparent. So if you go to costplusdrugs.com, I'll say it again for those in the back, costplusdrugs.com, and you put in the name of the medication you're interested in. We have about 2,500 of them, not all of them. We're going to show you our cost. So there's a cancer drug called imatinib. And if you just walked into a drugstore and just say, I have a prescription for this, they might charge you anywhere from $200 to $2,000. Well, you go to costplusdrugs.com, you'll see our cost, depending on the potency, is $22. And we mark it up 15%. And if you want it mail order, then we have a pharmacist that works for us that we charge $5 to review everything to make sure there's, you have to fill out a form saying what other meds and supplements and everything you take. And then there's $5 for shipping and handling, and we'll ship it to your door. Or we have an affiliated network, so you can go pick it up. But the fact that we only mark it up 15% means that for that imatinib, instead of it being $200, $500, $2,000, it's going to be $24. I mean, I literally had a friend call me up. Thanks. There are just so many examples of that. I mean, there was multiple. One of the smartest things that we did was we actually published our price list. Nobody had ever published a price list for medications. Like if they came on Shark Tank to talk about the drug industry, I'd be like, get the hell out of here. This is like awful. But no one ever published the price list. So we published our price list. And what that enabled researchers to do is compare the price that Medicare paid for the drugs that we carry to our cost. And so there's all these research reports that have come out saying for these 9 urology drugs, if the CMS, the federal government, had bought them from costplusdrugs.com, they would have saved $900 million a year. For these oncology drugs, it was $1.6 billion a year. The FTC did a probe of pharmacy benefit managers saying that they overcharged by $7.3 billion a year, and they used our data. And so now we can be smarter shoppers. And if you have a high copay, co-insurance, wherever, if you work for a company that doesn't know what their benefits are about, just have them check out costplusdrugs.com. And then if you work at a healthcare center, if you work at a clinic, if you work at a hospital, now we have Cost Plus Marketplace, and we're able to sell it wholesale to hospitals, and we're saving hospitals millions and millions of dollars each. So costplusdrugs.com, check it out. Thanks, Jeff.
What's the reaction been by the major pharmaceuticals?
The major pharmaceutical companies are aligned with us against the biggest pharmacy benefit managers, who are just middlemen that serve no real purpose. And they don't like them either. They're just a way to create the cost. But the big pharma companies, while we're aligned against pharmacy benefit managers, there's some drugs they won't sell to us because they're afraid that the pharmacy benefit managers will remove them from their formularies. So they may have they may cover, let's just say, 20 million lives, and if they're telling you, if you sell to costplusdrugs.com, we're not going to put you in front of those 20 million lives, then, so that's been our biggest challenge as a company. And, the pharma companies say, well, we like you, Mark, and the pharmacy benefit managers say, we don't like you, so what? And so we're fighting through that. But we've only been in business 3 years. 3 years, and I think we've had a major impact. So we'll get there.
What responsibility do people in your position have in terms of philanthropy or whatever else? You're certainly doing it here and in a number of other issues.
I don't speak for other people. Everybody's got to do what they think is important to them. I don't want to tell anybody else what to do with their time or money. Do what you think is right.
Great. For students here at ASU who are looking to get into public service, whether it's elected office, appointed positions, being in the foreign service or civil service, what character traits, as a businessman, do you look for public servants or people in government to have? What's most important?
Do nothing. No, it's the same traits as what I look for in hiring, and it's the same traits what I look for in entrepreneurs. Number one is curiosity. We live in a world that's always changing. We talked about AI. We talked about what's happening politically. just look at the geopolitics. You've got to be curious, because if you're not aware of these things and you just have tunnel vision, life is going to pass you by. And whether it's reading, whether it's podcasts, you just have to be as curious as you possibly can. And then you've got to be open-minded. Like, I try not to be dogmatic. I know there's a lot of things that I'm going to be wrong on, and that's okay. I want to learn why I was wrong or why I was right. And so, you know, I'm an independent. I'm not a Democrat. I'm not a Republican. I try to look at every issue individually to see what I think is right for either me or the American people, in my opinion. And I think, you know, that's a big step forward, because we've become so partisan that everybody wants to have their team. You know, and the Republicans versus the Democrats are kind of like, you know, Arizona versus ASU, right? It's just like automatic hate, or Indiana versus Purdue. Only in that case, it's real hate, not just, you know, sports hate. And so I think, don't walk in. It's okay to go work, you know, if you line one way or the other, it's okay to go work with the Democratic Party or the Republican Party or the Forward Party or any party or no party. But when you get involved, go in with an open mind. Don't go in thinking they have all the answers. Go in thinking, I have a lot to learn, but I also have a lot to teach. Because your perspective, you know, the millennials used to think they were the first digital generation, and they had this big advantage because they grew up with it all. But now you're the AI generation, and nobody in politics that I've seen really gets AI. So you have a huge, huge, huge advantage. And so go forward and participate for sure, but keep an open mind and pay attention to the tools and have confidence in yourself. And I think if you do those things, whether it's in business, whether it's in politics, whether it's as a student, just if you're always learning, always curious, always adding. Steve Jobs, I think, said it best. He said, everything is just a remix. And if you think about it, everything is a remix. You start with this little ball of information, and then you just try to add everything to it, just slowly but surely. And the more you add to it, the more confident you get and the more you can contribute. And so go out and just learn. And again, you've got the greatest tools ever created with AI, and every single day, if not every single week, they're improving them. And so when you walk in the door, if you're the experts in that space, they have to listen to you. And because you know how to use these tools, you don't have to take the dogma from the Republicans or the dogma from the Democrats. Go in there and influence them the way you want the world to look. Because we need younger voices, and particularly now. We don't need people my age. I mean, it's just like, I mean, maybe only 25, but it's still too old for this. But we need younger voices who are aggressive in contributing. So that's kind of where I stand.
Well, talking about being in the arena, one thing I've always appreciated about you is you are in the arena. I mean, whether it's you're everywhere. I mean, on Shark Tank, I wasn't as impressed with Dancing with the Stars as I was with the voiceover on The Simpsons.
Oh, let me just tell you, season 8, yes, the Simpsons episode I did was the best. And it was so much fun. So they put me in a sound booth, right? And it's about me owning the Mavs and being a crazy owner and being a billionaire, and there being a billionaire handshake with me and Jeff Bezos and Mark Zuckerberg or somebody. And anyways, the best part was they put me in the sound booth, and I had to do this thing where cartoon me in The Simpsons was jumping off an arena like this, screaming, I'm out of my mind. And so they literally had me in this sound booth for 25 minutes saying, louder, louder, louder. You got to scream, I'm out of my mind, louder. So hunt down on YouTube my Dancing with the Stars and my Simpson episode. You'll be duly impressed.
Well, about being in the arena, you've never shied away from giving your opinion.
No.
You mentioned you're political independent. You've supported Republicans. You've supported Democrats. In the last race, you supported a Democrat, but I noticed the day after the election, you wrote a tweet, an X, saying congratulations.
Yeah, of course.
Mr. President, you're my president, kind of thing. Then what's the obligation of every American? And is that what gives you hope that there are institutions out there. We have a history that.
It's not so much that I believe in who the president is. Look, I stood next to Joe Biden and he about fell asleep, you know? So it wasn't like I was so excited about that. I just wasn't a fan of Donald Trump and some of the Republican policies. So I campaigned for Kamala Harris. But Donald won. President Trump won. And that's our president. But that's not our country. I can't say it enough. Every single one of you, every entrepreneur, every student, that's what makes us who we are. And going back to what I said earlier, that doesn't mean you don't stand up for what you believe in. I grew up in that generation where, you know, there were, the Vietnam War, I had friends whose older brothers died in the Vietnam War. That was terrifying. I remember the day they ended the draft when I was 15, because you had to register at 16, bawling my eyes out. Literally, I have this vivid imagination. That shit was scary, right? It's like I would have gone, I would have served proudly, but I was terrified that I'd get drafted and picked. And back then, you know, Buffalo, Springfield, and all, you know, for what it's worth, hey kids, what's that sound? Everybody, you know, those were motivating to us. In this generation, then like now, stand up for what you believe in, but it still comes down to who we are as a country. And the things, there's, like we talked about earlier, there's things I think the Democrats should do. But he's our president. You know, let the people who are going to call names. Great, I don't need to do that. Let the people who have ideas contribute their ideas. And when you see things that you think aren't right for this country, you think he's violating some law or just stand up, tell somebody, you know. And hopefully the people know, you know, the ACLUs, et cetera, will sue them when they go out of bounds. But for you, stand up and be you. Stand up and know this is your country. He's 79 years old, you know. He's not 21. What's going to happen between now and when you're 79? That's what matters. And look, there's things that terrify me that he's doing, things that I do differently, things that I'll stand up against, but not everything. Not everything he's doing is wrong. And when I agree with him, I'm going to support him. Like, he's had people reach out, I don't know if he did it or somebody, people from the healthcare group, CMS and everything, they've reached out to me and I've had conversations with them almost every day this week. I'm going to help him because this is my country. This is the country I love. These are the people I love, and I want to do everything that I can for this country. Just because I disagree with who the president is, he's still the president, but it's still our country. The president is a job. Being an American is a lifestyle, and in many cases a choice. And it's who we are that makes this country great. Because I truly believe that even though I might not like the appointees, even though I think there's some really fucked up things going on, excuse my French, that there are enough of us to stand up and rise up, to do the things that matter, to make this country continue forward and to get better. That's just the way I look at it. And that's so when it comes time to say, okay, yeah, he's my president, but more importantly, this is my country. And that takes precedence.
Let me just ask, if you were a student, in closing, if you were a student at ASU, would you join the IOP?
The what?
The IOP, the Institute of Politics.
Oh, I'm like, okay, was this a TikTok thing I missed? Or, yeah. Oh, of course I would. Right. I would pay money to be able to join the IOP.
And you don't even have to.
Oh, it's free. You can even get Kevin to come and Mr. Wonderful will do it then. Yeah, of course you join IOP. This is your way to learn the best way to contribute.
Well, thank you. Well, please, all of us, let's join in.
That was fun. Thanks,
thank you, Mark.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you.